Good evening, children of the internet. This is Travis Wallstein with AirServe Heating and Air Conditioning in Council Bluffs, and also Wallstein Plumbing in Council Bluffs. Have survived the tornadoes. There may or may not be a video associated with this podcast tonight when it actually comes out from the tornadoes that hit in Southwest Iowa last Friday. One started about a quarter mile from the house. It was rather exciting. Hit some neighbors, and of course, we know about the people in Minden and Elkhorn and just the area around Omaha Council Bluffs. So obviously there's a lot of repaired stuff to be done, so we don't want to miss that. But we have survived. So tonight we have Ryan Cannoy. Ryan is grew up in and around Sheldon, Iowa. He's been in construction for a long time. You work in facilities for school. Now I'll let him get into it, tell about himself. But Ryan, how you doing tonight?
I'm good. How are you, Trav?
Living the dream, still as skinny as ever. So
skinny as ever,
and drinking some Appalachian sipping cream. And then for some reason, my son bought Coors, but this is Coors Banquet. It ain't Coors Light. So it's not Busch Light, but it is what it is. So.
Well, I had to go with the Quick Start coffee so I could stay awake.
Hey, whatever works. Hey, Quick Starts are pretty nice, actually.
Some of that.
They're not bad.
I get you a plug there on your podcast. Maybe I'll send you a check.
There you go. Well, they got one over by Des Moines there at DeSoto. It's like we stopped there one time and it was like, well, heck, this is a whole lot better than the other competition that was right next door and across the street. It's like, holy cow, we're going to stop here, So
yeah, them suckers are popping up all over the place now.
Giving all Casey's and Come and Go a run for their money, they better step it up a little bit.
They certainly are.
Yeah. So anyway, I wanted to have you on. And like I said, we're like episode 60, 62. We've now went to we're on Spotify, have been, and of course we're on YouTube now. So
now they're going to be able to look at us.
Yeah, as I said, I still have a face for radio. I just want to throw that out there. So, but you've got quite the background. You've been in construction for a long time. So, kind of talk to us about your construction background and what you've done, kind of, with your history, working at college, working as a contractor, and kind of talk about your background and a little bit of what you've done.
Sure. Well, we're not that far apart in age, even though you look much older than me.
Wow. Well, we're both younger than Steve, so we'll throw that out there.
Steve. So just to throw that, just for clarification, we might be cousins. So. Yeah, we come from that same era of high school counselors telling us that we should go to a 4-year school.
Yeah.
Right. And I can, now that I'm older and you listen to like the Mike Rose of the world and those guys, and you think back and you go, I don't ever really remember anybody. There was some guys that had just chosen right away, we're not doing it. And they were in shop class and they didn't want anything else to do with any other class in the high school.
Yeah.
But I don't remember anybody looking at you saying, hey, there's another option.
Yeah.
So, it was a strong push. And I can really remember, you're not going to like this part. I decided to go to Iowa State.
Right state, wrong school. At least it's not Nebraska.
Yeah. So, and I can really remember thinking, I had all these. I actually went to Iowa State as an animal science major. So
I can see that.
Rural Northwest Iowa, a lot of farms, all that stuff. And so my big thought was veterinarian, right? Mm-hmm. I hadn't put a lot of thought into it. Let's put it that way. But that was my thought, right?
Shocker, yeah.
And you're 18. It sounded good. Everybody's either going to be a doctor, a lawyer, or something professional, right? And I remember sitting through, classes where I just kind of thought, I'm not sure this is for me. And then I remember one day a guy came in and he was talking about getting into vet school. He was talking about how important it was to take these classes serious if you wanted to get in vet school. And I wasn't a terrible student. I just really wasn't that interested in some of what they were serving me. And I remember this guy came in and he started talking about the graduates from the year before that are the guys that went on to vet school, but the guys that didn't make it to get to vet school, the highest paid job of a graduate from animal science the year before. I mean, it was a good pay. I mean, it was like in the six figures, but he traveled between the Caribbean and the Midwest selling frozen bull semen. and that was his job.
There you go.
So
selling bull sperm. There
you
go.
Not that I'm sure it's a great job, but I thought, well, that's my option. If I don't make it to vet school, in my mind, I was either going to be a vet or I'm selling frozen bull semen.
It's better. It's better to be the guy that's selling it than the guy that's doing the jacking.
Yeah, I don't want to collect it. Yeah, that's true. That's
the
true.
collection process. I quit.
So, so I went about a semester there, and I actually lived with our cousin Chris.
Okay,
Steve's sister. I lived in her basement, and and it may or may not have also helped that I had a girlfriend here, and so I was a little more drawn back to Sheldon. And I ended up landing at our vocational school here, and I really I think I had spent a lot of my time. My dad was a mechanic. He had a wood shop in his basement. Grandpa was a farmer. We had all these things that around you where people were always constantly working with their hands. And I think at an early age, I had thought maybe it was a societal thing too, where you thought, that those just aren't good jobs. And I think even our parents at some point said, hey, unless you want to work this hard, you better go to school, but then, I came back and I found a carpentry program with a really great instructor. Ron Volink was his name. He's passed away quite a few years back now. But yeah, I mean, he was just one of those guys that he took a group of kind of misfit guys and we went through the process of building a house. And he took, now back then, he didn't let us use air nailers. When we hung doors, we routed all our hinges in. We didn't do pre-hung doors, anything like that. So I mean, we did a lot of work by hand, and we were just kind of the tail end of that generation to do that. And at that point, he deemed it was pretty necessary for us to know it. Today, there's things I still use, but not very often.
Sure.
Only when I'm in a pinch.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
But so there's days I'm glad I know it, but I have to dig deep back into the file cabinet to find.
Got to dig into the gray matter a little bit, shake the head, rub it a little bit. Yeah.
So yeah, I spent a year and a half. It was a 3-semester program at the time, and I spent a year and a half doing that. Came out, and I actually worked for my future father-in-law for a few years. And they did a lot of concrete work, a lot of remodel. We did tons of ag stuff.
Sure.
Pole buildings, hog confinements, things like that. So a lot of variety of good experience. And then at some point, maybe I was just scared. Maybe I thought it would be better if I'd go on my own before I asked his daughter to marry me.
Oh, you want to make sure you still had a job. There you go.
I just wanted
maybe he didn't like you, So.
I needed some distance in case he could get a hold of me, right? But yeah. At some point there, I in the mid to late 90s, I decided I was going to kind of hang my shingle out there and do my own thing. And yeah, for the better part of 8 to 10 years, I did that till Yeah, it was 7, 8 years, and it went really well.
Mm-hmm.
We had the instructor that I had at the community college had passed away. Ron had
Sure.
died. In the process, they had hired a new guy, but then they had suspended the program. They decided they weren't going to run it for a while. But then they got a new dean. And Merle Corver was his name, an elderly guy. He was just an interim dean, but he was a carpenter by trade. Had owned lumber yards back in the day, and he just really decided he needed to get this carpentry program going again. And he called me and kind of asked me to help just kind of piece it together.
Sure.
And I think there was a number of us that he was just bouncing ideas off of, and knew that I had gone through the program. And then once he kind of got some stuff pieced together, one day he looked at me and said, "Hey, do you think maybe you'd want to teach it?" And I honestly was at a point. I honestly was at a point where I really didn't think I wanted to. I had some employees. We were probably doing one of the biggest projects we had done yet, and but then at the same time, I was also having the same trouble that everybody else was having with like I can't find anybody.
Yeah,
I had a couple good guys, but I mean, you couldn't find anybody else.
Yeah, it's hard. Even today, it's hard. So
yeah, and it always made me nervous because you didn't even want to advertise. Yeah, because word of mouth was great. I mean, if you could get somebody through word of mouth, but you'd throw an advertisement in the paper, and the first guy that would show up at your door looked like he fell in a tackle box and somebody used his face for a coloring book, and he, and I'm going, you might be a terrific guy, but dude, I work inside people's houses, and
they don't want to look at you. This is not the look that's going to sell people.
No, so, and you hate to talk that way, but at the same time, you try to tell some of these young guys that too, at some point. And I know some of that's more the norm today, right? I mean, you see a lot of guys that have a lot of tattoos and different stuff, and it has been more culturally accepted.
Oh, definitely, no doubt about it, absolutely.
25 years ago, in conservative Northwest Iowa, that was difficult, and so we weren't finding a lot of, and guys would come and they'd have zero skill, and. That. I mean, if you have somebody that there's the rare diamond in the rough that they're mechanically inclined enough to, even if they haven't done that trade, they can
figure it out.
But otherwise, you spend the better part of the next year trying to train somebody that you're not even sure is going to stay.
Yeah. So, it's tough because you look at it and you don't know. And you don't know till you get them in the door to find out what the heck they're like. I can tell you, we run into it, on HVAC and the plumbing side of it. It's like, okay, and what are their capabilities? Part of what we run into is sometimes the capabilities of that person, we think they sound great, but then you put the rubber to the road and it's like, whoa.
Yeah.
Not it might sound like an 8-cylinder, but it works like a 4-cylinder.
Yeah. And I always said that I always preferred somebody that walked in and looked at me and said, I don't know. Like I've never done this, but I'm willing to learn.
Yeah.
As opposed to the guy that came in and went, "Oh yeah, I can do that. Oh yeah, I can do that." and the more he says, "Oh yeah, I can do that," the more you're starting to see the BS pile up.
Oh shit! There you go. Get the waders on, get the shovel out, because here we go. So
so I did that. I ended up deciding to go ahead and teach. And I taught at NCC for 14 years.
Yeah.
Had every year we built a house. So there's 14 houses in the 4-county area that are sitting on property, making property tax dollars for communities around Northwest Iowa that we built, that people are living in.
And if you did a good job with it, you call Ryan Cannoy. If you don't like the freaking house, call Steve Wallstein.
Yeah, call Steve Wallstein. That's right. And this number is 712. Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, no, it was great. I mean, I had some really great guys, and
Mhm.
today, I mean, honestly, I love things like Snapchat and Facebook and things for those reasons. I mean, I get
Oh
guys.
yeah.
I have two guys right now that religiously Snapchat me at least weekly, if not daily, on stuff they're working on, and and then I mean, I just have a lot of students that I still keep in contact with, and they've gone on to do really great stuff
Mhm.
in that trade. So, um, you know, I
So
yeah, go ahead.
no, it's really cool though because we talk apprenticeship. An
Yep.
apprenticeship in trade school. Which listen, I live in Council Bluffs, Iowa Westerns in our backyard. There's
Right.
some things. Their diesel mechanic program's great, but their HVAC program, they have a program. Yeah, not so great. I'm not meaning that to derogatory, but a lot of it has to do with what's the teacher like? Do the
Yep.
students buy in? Because there's nothing worse than spending $5,000-$10,000 and having somebody, you know, not get the value out of it. And so
Right.
obviously you get to see from that because the young adults afterwards to see what they're doing. That we're
Yep.
hey, something I taught them is helping them make a living,
Right.
and
Yep.
that's pretty damn cool.
It
Yeah,
is. It's pretty rewarding. I mean, it's kind of like having an employee too. I mean, if you know they're putting food on their table and providing for their family, and you're a part of that, that is rewarding. But we just you know our program doesn't exist anymore. So the carpentry
yeah.
program is not at NCC anymore.
Yeah, they decided they needed heavy diesel mechanics and not carpentry. Thanks, NCC. We
Yeah,
appreciate that.
yeah,
So,
yeah. We had
did I say that out loud?
yeah,
I'm sorry.
well, yeah. There was a decision to do some remodeling, and there was some musical chairs, and we didn't have a chair when the music stopped. And
That's not a good. That's not a fun deal.
no, and
Absolutely.
but it did part of that boiled down to I think one of the things you see at the community college level that maybe not so much in an apprenticeship in a business, but like at the community college level, what you see is when the economy's really good,
Yeah.
our numbers tend to be a little lower.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, absolutely. No doubt about
because
it.
I can hire you right out of high school and offer
Yeah.
you a crazy wage that
Hmm.
because I need bodies.
Yeah.
And when the economy slows down, I mean, if nobody's building houses right now,
Yeah.
there's no carpenters hiring people. Well, then the kids come to school to learn.
Yeah.
And they
2009 is a great example. 2007 and 2009 is a great
right,
example of that.
right. And so the last how many years? I mean, things just didn't slow down, and uh, we were struggling with numbers to a point. The other side of that is, I mean, we were one of the only programs on campus that built something that we sold. So,
Hmm.
but it was good. It was good value, and um, we just. I'm thankful for the years that I had there, and thankful for the relationships I made. I mean, I still have good relationships with 99% of everybody out there. That if I need a welder or I need an electrician or I need advice, I mean, I got all kinds of guys that I
Hmm.
certainly can call on, and they're great guys and great instructors.
Well, one of the cool things that you've done, and I've seen on your Facebook and stuff, is you guys went down. I don't know why you went to Tennessee, but besides there are a bunch of hillbillies down there, and I'll say that for my ear friends that are in Tennessee.
Sure,
So
sure.
I'm an equal opportunity offender, by the way.
Yeah,
So,
I can
but you
appreciate
guys,
that.
yeah, but you guys would go down every year. You would do, I guess I'd call it a mission trip for lack of a better way to do it. You'd go down and
Yep.
you would do it's a community project or something that you guys, a give back project, maybe not set up locally, but where they can see stuff in the other, outside of Northwest Iowa. So talk about that a little bit.
Sure. It started my very first year. So way back in 2005, um, we had kind of kicked the idea around. I had done some mission project stuff through church, and my wife and I were youth group sponsors, and I had done a couple trips with some high school kids. I really didn't go into the job thinking, "Hey, this is something I can do with these guys."
Yeah.
Um, and that first year, I had I had a guy from a local church approach me, and it was right after Hurricane Katrina.
Oh, sure.
And so they had a group of guys that were going down into the Gulf Shores, Alabama area.
Yep.
And they needed bodies. Most of these guys were retired, right?
Yeah.
So they
need young backs, is what.
And that was it. They had this big plan of putting this house up, but I think they kind of went, how in the world are we going to do this? And so this guy, it was a guy from my church, and he approached me and he says, hey, do you think the college would let you bring a group of guys down there? And initially I thought, maybe. That sounds cool, but I don't know, And funny story, I had that guy, that dean that was our interim dean that when we started. And I remember I went to him and I said, hey, what do you think about this?
Mm-hmm.
And now remember, he's an interim dean, right? So he's
interim.
He's kind of filling a seat. And sees the exit sign, right? So he kind of looked at me.
He's like, if they don't like the decision, they can always fire me. It's not a problem.
Well, the deal was, I think it looked like work, and so he went, I don't think we can do it. And we had a really cool president then. His name was Bill Giddings, and Bill was really interactive with our programs. I remember a number of times he always drove this Tahoe, and he'd come rolling up. And he'd be hanging out his side window to harass students that were working on the house, and and they never knew who he was the first semester. He'd roll up and this old guy'd hang out the window and yell, "Hey, it's crooked," and they'd look around, they'd look for me, and they'd be like, "Who is that guy?" You go, "That's the president." So he was always great that way. But I remember meeting him in the hallway one day, and I remember being a little discouraged when the guy that was in the dean spot said no. But I thought, maybe that's just policy, right? And I ran into the president and I said, hey, do you got a minute? And so I pitched him this idea. And he looked at me and went, why wouldn't we go? Because that's great PR. He goes, and if you can get your guys on board, And so I'm all excited now, and I'm talking to him, and then I had to look at him and go, I got one problem. And I says, Bill, I said, when you were a kid, did you ever ask your dad for something? And he said no. So then you went and asked your mom? And he looks at me and he goes, you already asked the dean, and he said no, right? You got it. He sat back in his chair and went, I'll take care of it. Don't worry.
You go.
So,
hooked you up.
Yeah. And honestly, from that trip, almost every year we went somewhere. We went to Gulf Shores after Katrina. I'll be honest with you, what led us to Nashville was it seemed easy to find projects where there was natural disasters, right?
Oh, yeah,
or people really in need. If you went somewhere really more poverty stricken. Though, like we went way down into southern Texas one time and worked in some communities. But then in 2010, Nashville had a big flood. It flooded their mall and like the Opry and all downtown, all that stuff. And so the Habitat for Humanity outfit there was doing all this rehab from the flood. And that's really how we got hooked up with them. And we started, they were just so great to work with that they put a project together. They set it aside for us. It was only like 12, 13 hours to get there.
Yeah, it's not a bad trip.
No. So it really just kind of became our hub for a little bit. We had a great guy that was a project coordinator there. His name was Eric Helm. And you and him would be two peas in a pod. He was in the service. He's just an all around good guy. And he'd have us all out. We'd bring steaks from Iowa, and he'd have us all out to his house, and he'd grill them all.
Oh heck so yeah! That's what I'm talking about.
That's right. Every year he'd have us out, and he'd grill steaks, and as long as we brought the meat. So
There you
it was
go.
a good trade. But I mean, it was a good experience because those guys, we talked a lot about, especially as, if you're going to be a business owner someday, or even, some of them wanted to be, some of them had no desire to.
Yeah.
And we often talked about how, sometimes it's easier to give a little bit of your time than it is your money.
Oh, absolutely.
Even though you're
I,
strapped for time, and when you have a skill, I mean, your time is really worth something.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
and so, just to have them go down and see, and for those guys, it was, some of those guys had never left Northwest Iowa, so it was a neat trip. Um, I had guys that went multiple times. I had guys that they were done with school and they were out working, and they would call me in the spring and say, "Hey, if you're going on a trip, I'm going to ask my boss for time off and
Really?
and a donation for your trip, and we'll come along."
Oh,
And
that's fantastic.
so
I mean, that's great.
I had a number of guys that did that, and just to tag. I mean, they were single guys, not married yet, so it was a great opportunity for them to tag along, and then they got to kind of network with our current students, and yeah, it was.
Well, it's opportunities for them to maybe find somebody if they're a growing company, or just connect and be a part of the program. I mean, that's
Yep.
fantastic. Actually, you can't buy that kind of PR. I mean,
No,
that's great. So
no, yeah, we built a lot of great relationships with a lot of people doing it. So it was,
yeah,
and we had great support from our community. I mean, they initially looked at me and said, "Well, you're going to need to fundraise, because this is going to be kind of expensive to go house
yeah,
everybody." And
yeah.
and we, I mean, our guys were creative, but I looked at them the first day and said, "Guys, I've had tons of people try to sell me crap, you know, and anytime some little kid comes to my door and tries to sell me a Christmas wreath or a butter braid or something, I'd rather just give him the $20. I mean, 'cause
Yeah, so you don't want the stuff.
I really
Just
don't."
here. There's
And
a donation. Move on.
so that very first year, I said, "What if we just go ask for the stinking money and just tell them
Yeah,
what we're doing?" And
yeah,
I said, "But I'm not going to do it. I mean, you guys have to do it." And they
yeah,
went around town to local business, and a lot of guys in our local manufacturing place, a lot of them have NCC backgrounds. So
yeah.
I mean, honestly, within a week or two, we had all the money we needed to go every year. So
Yeah.
um,
Well, that's fantastic. So,
yeah,
and here's the deal: it's good PR. It's good for the college. It's good for the people that are there. And
yep,
if you're out doing good things for for good people, it's a week 10 days, whatever it is. And here's the deal:
right,
you can't. It's also experience in doing their job in real life situations. So,
yep,
I mean, and volunteering can be fantastic because, well, you're not getting paid for it. You're doing it because you want to do it, and that says a lot about a person. So,
yep. And I really felt like I probably should have got hazard pay for having to spend 24/7 with these guys for a week. But I never, I never,
well,
I never saw that in any of my checks. But
yeah.
so,
Well, they had to look at you though. So
that
I
is
mean,
true.
you got a face that your mother or wife
They're
will love.
they're probably still in therapy over that, so it probably equals out.
Uh, so let's talk a little bit about what you're doing now. You're working you're working for Sheldon Community Schools. Am I correct on that? Tell me a little bit
Correct.
about what you're doing there.
Sure. So I mean, and that was one of the nice parts about about a trade. I mean, really, I mean, it was we always used to talk about that with our students, where when we were mostly residential construction, right? So
Yeah.
we often would talk about how when you're the carpenter on site, I mean, you're usually the first guy in. I mean, you're the guy out there pulling string lines, marking stuff
Hmm.
out before the build ever starts. And when all the plumbers and electricians and HVAC guys and everybody's done, you're probably the last guy pulling stuff out of the site.
Yep.
And you just, because of that, you get to see so much of what everybody else does.
Yep.
And we really put a lot of focus on training guys this idea that a house is really a system. It's not just
No.
like you're not just building this box and then I expect Travis to come in and just make his stuff work.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some reason why I do the things I do, and you know, just little dumb things like framing studs over top of floor joists so that when you come to cut your cold air returns in,
Yeah, exactly.
everything's in line, right?
Everything lines up in one
Yeah.
shock.
And you could put the most efficient HVAC system in, and if I've really built a really poorly performing structure, it doesn't matter if your system's efficient, right? But we're still going to blame it on you in the end.
Yeah, don't worry. You can put lipstick on a pig, but it's still a pig at the end of the day. And I've got good contractors I work with, and I've got some that aren't so good. Usually the guys who do it professional rigging, and I'm not against DIYers when I say this, but sometimes the DIYers that think they're smarter than everybody else, they're the worst ones to work with because they really have no clue, and they'll figure it out because when they build their next house, they'll hire somebody to do it.
They figured out how big of a pain in the butt it was. Yeah, and just pain in the butt working for them. Yeah.
Well, I got one of them right now that I'm hoping that he gets moved in, and I'm not gonna say names or anything else. It's like, boy, here we go.
Yep. So a lot of that translated fairly easy into at least the management side, because you were always dealing with people and sub trades and from a hard skills standpoint, I'm certainly not I'm not going to pretend like I'm a plumber, an electrician, or an HVAC guy. So
you don't want me framing houses either. So I'm just going to throw that out there.
So I'm a firm believer in surrounding myself with people smarter than me.
Yeah.
and through trickle down, that makes me seem smarter than I really am, right?
Hey, your kids are Hawkeyes, so you know what? You figured that out really well.
I did, yeah, right. That is true. Somehow I was a Cyclone. My son turned into a Hawkeye when he was about 6, and he's I'm not even sure he owns a T-shirt that doesn't have yellow and black on it, and my daughter ended up going to school there. So
I understand the yellow and black deal. So I know what it is. So
So no, it was a good transition. There's definitely days I missed the construction side. For me the construction side was I could physically see every day what I did or didn't get done. Right.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
And something comes to a conclusion. Like when I'm all said and done, the last piece of trim goes on, and you could walk away and step back and see a job done.
Yeah.
And there's something about that that's pretty rewarding, to move on to the next one. And
absolutely.
And to build just good relationships with people, I think. I have a lot of customers that from years ago that, I see them in the grocery store or something, and you're still good friends with them. So,
well, you get to know them. You get to know them and spend some time with them. You get to know them as a customer, but hey, what their likes aren't, and sometimes you end up breaking bread or drinking a Busch Light or whatever with them, and you get to know them a little bit. So,
we used to talk about it with our guys a lot. Even my employees, when I had them, is when these people let you in their home. A lot of times when we're going in to do some pretty significant changes, maybe.
Oh, yeah. I don't care if you're doing framing or a remodel or an add-on, or even if you're redoing, just like I said, a bathroom remodel.
Yep.
Your bathroom and your bedroom, nothing against the kitchen, are probably your 2 most important rooms in the house. And if your bathroom sucks and your bedroom sucks and the heat and air don't work, you'll never friggin' hear the end of it. I know firsthand how that
I bet you do. Yeah. Well, it's just one of those things that, people have more money invested in their home, most people, than any other thing they own.
Oh, I agree with that.
So for them to let you come in and tear it apart, they're really putting a lot of faith in you and
Tr-
trust, right?
trust,
That you're
absolutely.
going to do a good job and you're not going to screw them. And, in the end, it's going to be what they hoped it was.
Yeah,
And
well, and you're putting someone's dreams in motion.
yeah,
Is what
yep.
you're doing. So
Yeah. And those dreams don't come cheap.
no, that was
Most of them visited the bank before they visited with me or you, and it's an investment, right?
Yeah, it's kind of funny how that works. Well, I'm glad my heater decided to kick off. We got chicks in the shed, so we got to keep it climate controlled so the chicks survive. So
You better
now I
watch how
don't.
you say that. I mean, if your wife's watching and then you talk about you got chicks in the shed,
Yeah. Hey, she brought them home, so
okay. Well, that's okay then. Yeah.
yeah, it's all right. So now I know with your position, because you're head of facilities for Sheldon. Is that basically your position? Then?
That's correct. Yep.
Okay. So you're not necessarily now in your previous life you dealt with kids and what they do.
Sure.
And my experience has been, of course, you've got younger kids. My older boys graduated in 2016, and like I said, they didn't talk about trade school. They didn't hardly talk about the military. It's 4-year school, or you're a piece of what.
Yep.
Right or wrong, indifferent, whatever.
Yep.
Now, my youngest son, Hunter, he graduated in 2022 from Lewis Central. And one of the things that got talking about is a lot of these kids, especially from football and wrestling team, you never heard them talk about trades in 2016. But in 2022, at least there was some eyes being opened up.
Yeah.
Now, and I know there's a huge initiative and there's a lot of money being thrown out there. And I don't know how much you tune into that. Are you seeing with where you're at up in that, or are you starting to see more of an emphasis towards that, not necessarily just plumbing, heating, electrical, and framing, but just in you don't have to go to a 4-year school. There's a lot of alternatives there for kids who maybe aren't a 4-year material. And listen, I'm not 4-year material. I'll call it for what it is.
Yeah, I hear you.
What are you kind of seeing? I mean, being around the school system, are you starting to see maybe a shift from where? Yeah, they're still talking about 4-year stuff, but if you're not doing a 4-year deal, that's okay too. That there's a lot of opportunities. What are you guys seeing up in that part of the world?
Yeah, and it's hard. It's hard to say. We do see a lot of, like, our industrial tech program this year. They has a new instructor, and he's moved things in a little different direction and breathed a little life back into the program. And I do see kids. I think we went from a shop space that maybe kids were just signing up for class because they knew they could just go sit around and horse around, and to now all of a sudden I see a shop space where I walk in there and there might be 10, 12 kids, and they're actually doing something. I mean, they're engaged, they're building stuff, and it's not just a kid, like I said earlier, it's not just a kid that doesn't want anything to do with any of the other classes. He just wants to be in the shop. I mean, it's kids that, they're doing a good job in physics and chemistry and algebra, but they're choosing to also take a shop class, and they're learning how to wire a switch, and they're learning how to build a little nightstand, and they're building a shed out behind the building right now, a lawn shed. So I think they've done a good job pitching it to kids. That, like, one class, I think they actually call it something along the lines of, it has something to do with home ownership, right, or home maintenance. Okay. So I think they're doing a good job of pitching it as, hey, these things are expensive if you have to hire somebody, and at the same time you can get a little taste of what these are. And so,
absolutely.
You might. I think it's amazing how many kids just have no idea. I mean, when you talk about like HVAC, if you walked into our high school, I would dare to bet you, I'd have to bet you a case of Busch Light or something. I would bet you like 80, I'd even go higher than that. Maybe 85% of the kids, unless they could Google it, couldn't tell me what HVAC stood for.
No, they can't.
No.
So there is a very negative connotative terms out there, but I won't go there with that. So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I should say what it actually stands for.
Yeah, well, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. No, yeah. I get it.
So, but I mean, I think they're just so removed from it. And I think part of that comes from, like when me and you were kids, you could go get a summer job, and you could you could go with a guy and you could pretty much do anything he was doing. I mean, when I was in high school, my very first job, when I was doing some construction work, I worked for a company called Farmers Market and Excavating here in Sheldon when I was 15. Okay.
So you didn't work for this. You didn't work for the Stoffern brothers over in Sanborn. You weren't laying tile. No, you weren't doing that.
We poured concrete. We did a lot of dairy parlors and stuff like that. But that first summer, I didn't turn 16 until September.
Okay.
So I rode my bike across town to get in a pickup and then go do concrete work. Okay.
That sounds terrible.
Yeah, it was kind of terrible. And especially on the rain days when they let you go early, you had to ride your bike home in the rain. Most of the guys were pretty good and threw my bike in a pickup and took me home. But honestly, at 15, I mean, they didn't even think twice about like telling me to go cut something with a saw, or they'd show me how to do it. But then after that, I could just do it.
Yeah,
I was on roofs. I was, and actually part of that's the allure to it. I mean, I got to do some cool stuff.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Where now, I mean, you take a 16-year-old kid, what can I do with him legally?
Yeah. Well, legally, if he's your kid,
yeah, correct.
There's a lot more you can do if he's not your kid.
Yeah,
I can tell you that first.
And I have that right now, right? I mean, Jonathan's 15, and like we just did a kitchen. We sided a house. We've done windows. I mean, and he's really enjoying helping.
Yeah,
and learning along the way.
Yeah.
But if I was another 15-year-old kid, I mean, what can I have him do besides clean up around the job site? And I mean, he can't drive a truck, so I can't send him after stuff. I certainly can't put him in a skid loader or anything like that.
Yeah. Well,
so he doesn't get to do anything that he looks at this job and goes, "Oh man, this is pretty cool."
Yeah. Well, and that's part of the problem, listen, I'm not against safety. Okay. No, I understand that. But, there's part of learning, my son Hayden, who's 26, he's worked for me since he was 14, 15 years old. He's between working for me. He did a summer of concrete. He was in the Marine Corps, did utilities, HVAC, plumbing, generator work. He's been doing this for 12 years. I mean, he started when he was 14 Roy's when he started. Lots of hands-on, just like you said. And if he wasn't my kid, he wouldn't have got exposed to a tenth of what he was exposed to. It's too bad, we don't let we don't let the young kids do things in the name of safety and liability. So, we have attorneys, we got people that are, oh my God, they might get hurt. But, they'll sit there on their damn phone. And I'm guilty of being on my phone too, so don't get me wrong. But they'll sit there on their damn phone all day and they'll be exposed to whatever. But that's okay because they're not physically, exposed to whatever. And it's kind of like, what the heck's wrong? There's so many things wrong with this where you just,
to go back to your question. I mean, that's kind of what I see in this shop class is I'm seeing kids that are getting to go in and do things that they've just never got to do ever. I mean, I had the luxury of a dad that had a shop in the basement that he occasionally, you went down there and I'm going to use the term built stuff real loosely because it was here, take these boards and nail them together or something, right?
Well, it's either that or your mom was going to find a project for him to do.
Right, so it was a good stop and hide, right? Yeah. But, for as a kid, though, you got to be down there and experience some of it and see it. And, you weren't at least afraid of the tools and you recognized them, knew what they were. And, I just, I think the numbers speak to it, though. I mean, I think this generation that's coming out now, I think they're starting to realize that college is really expensive.
Oh, yeah.
And and that a lot of people that go to college aren't getting these big high paying jobs that they thought they were going to get.
No, absolutely not.
Some are. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, I want my doctor to go to school.
Hey, remember, the C's for doctors get degrees too. Those become military podiatrists and military doctors, and then they get good, and then they come out to the civilian world.
Then they come out. Well, yeah. There's certainly things we need the big 4, 6, 8 years of school for, but there's a lot of people that I think that are 10 or 12 years out of school that are doing jobs that they didn't need to go to school that long for.
No.
And now they just have this pile of debt sitting behind them. And I think this generation, that we're starting to see a generation of kids that their parents are the result of some of that. And I think they're starting to look at them and say, hey, the plumber that just came here this afternoon charged me, $120 an hour to be here. Maybe you should do that, and they're starting to realize that. Well, and the other side of that coin is, hey, to get that plumber here, I had to call 4 different places, and
finally one of them answered the phone.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I think they're starting to see that there's value in some of those trades, and that they're not. It's okay to go to work and get dirty, and to come home and at the end of the day you're tired, but it's a good tired.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, absolutely.
I used to say that sitting at the college. I mean, I'd sit in a class and guys would give me crap and be like, oh, how must be nice having a semi-retired job, and you go. It amazed me how freaking tired you can be just sitting there. I mean, like if I didn't physically do something that day, working with the guys, just answering questions and just being out there. I mean, 6-7 hours of that, and dude, I was more tired than I could have been working 6 or 8 hours on a job site.
It was the mental part of it. I mean, honestly.
Yeah.
So,